Rain fell in silver streaks over the city, turning the streets into rivers of neon light. The reflections of signs and lamps shimmered in the puddles, creating a world that looked beautiful yet dangerous. In this city, shadows had their own language, and every alley held secrets. It was a city of power, of kings and queens hidden behind expensive doors, of deals made in whispers and promises that could break lives. Leora walked through the crowded street with her head held high. Her long coat flapped behind her like a banner of defiance. She was used to danger, and she enjoyed it. Danger was exciting. It made her blood run hot and her heart beat faster. She was a woman who liked to play with fire, not knowing when, or if, she might get burned. Her eyes fell on a figure standing near the club entrance. He was leaning against a pillar, calm and composed, yet there was a sharpness to him, a tension that could cut through steel. His leather jacket was worn, his boots scuffed, and his hair dark and slightly wet from the rain. To Leora, he seemed like a biker, rough, untamed, a man of the streets. She grinned, a little thrill rushing through her. "Well, aren't you a pretty one?" she said softly, letting her voice carry across the wet air. She stepped closer, letting her confidence fill the space between them. "Do you come here often?" The man's eyes met hers, and the world seemed to shrink for a moment. There was something in his gaze that made her stomach twist. It was calm, dangerous, and infinitely deep. He didn't smile. He didn't answer immediately. He simply studied her, as if he could see every thought behind her eyes. "You picked the wrong man to flirt with," he finally said. His voice was smooth, low, and controlled, but there was an undercurrent of warning beneath it. Leora laughed lightly, not deterred. "I don't think I did. I like a little danger." The man's lips twitched, almost a smile, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "Danger can be very expensive," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. Something about the way he spoke made her pause. He wasn't just a biker. There was authority in him, a presence that demanded respect without words. She felt both drawn to him and afraid. Fear was new but exciting, too. "I'm Leora," she said, letting the charm in her voice mask the flicker of caution in her heart. "Corvin," he replied. Just that. One word. His tone left no space for argument. The club behind them was alive with music and laughter, but the street felt quiet, as if it existed only for them. Leora leaned slightly closer, her curiosity overpowering the small voice of caution in her mind. She wanted to know more about him. Everything about him. Corvin studied her again. His mind was calculating, always aware of every movement, every possibility. He was a man used to danger and control. Leora didn't know that she had stepped into the territory of someone who ruled an empire built on whispers, shadows, and blood. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of a warning. "Why not?" Leora asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I like seeing the shadows up close. They have stories to tell, don't they?" Corvin's expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. There was something in her, something brave, perhaps reckless, that reminded him of choices he had long stopped making. He should send her away, tell her to forget this encounter, but he did not. She was too intriguing, too alive. "I can show you stories," he said quietly, "but they are not always safe to hear." The rain began to fall harder, splattering against the cobblestones and the sides of the club. Leora didn't move. She didn't want to run. She wanted to see what he would do next. Corvin finally pushed off from the pillar and started walking toward the shadows that led to a narrow alley. Leora hesitated for a moment, then followed. Her instincts screamed that she might be stepping into danger, but her heart beat with excitement, not fear. The alley was darker than the streets, lined with old brick walls and flickering lamps. There was a hush here, as if the city itself held its breath. Corvin stopped before a heavy, iron-studded door, which looked ancient and important. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Once you go in here, there is no turning back," he said. Leora tilted her head, curiosity burning in her eyes. "I've never been one to turn back." Corvin opened the door slowly, revealing a grand interior lit by soft candlelight. The room smelled of old wood, leather, and something faintly metallic. It was both elegant and intimidating. Leora's eyes widened. This was no biker's hideout. This was a place of power, of influence. He led her further inside, his steps silent, deliberate. Every corner held shadows. Every shadow seemed to whisper secrets. Leora felt a thrill run through her. She had walked into a world she didn't understand, and yet she didn't want to leave. Corvin stopped at a large window overlooking the city. Rain streaked the glass, and the lights of the city shimmered like stars fallen to earth. He looked at her then, his expression softer than before, but still intense. "Many who enter this world do not leave unchanged," he said. "You should be careful what you wish for." Leora smiled, a mixture of fear and excitement in her chest. "I don't want to be the same," she whispered. Corvin's eyes darkened. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken thoughts. He wanted to warn her, to push her away, but something in her courage, something in her refusal to back down, made him pause. Perhaps it had been a long time since anyone had dared to challenge him, or perhaps it had been longer since someone had made him feel human again. The sound of the rain outside grew louder, almost like a drum signaling the coming of something inevitable. Leora leaned slightly closer, drawn to him, drawn to the danger and mystery that surrounded him. She felt alive in a way she hadn't felt before. Corvin turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "You are brave," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Or foolish, perhaps both." Leora laughed softly, shaking her head. "I think brave is more fun." For a moment they stood in silence, two figures caught between worlds, the ordinary and the extraordinary, the safe and the dangerous. Corvin felt the weight of his world pressing in on him, and yet he didn't move to stop her. Leora felt the thrill of walking on the edge, knowing that she might fall but choosing not to care. Then, in a quiet corner of the room, she noticed something strange, a flicker of movement, almost too fast to see. Her eyes narrowed. There was more to this place than even she had imagined. A shadow moved across the wall, and for the first time she felt something she hadn't felt before. Real fear. Corvin noticed it too, his sharp instincts immediately alert. He stepped closer to her, his presence protective yet commanding. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said quietly, his eyes narrowing at the corner where the shadow had disappeared. "Seen what?" Leora asked, though her voice was quieter now. "Something dangerous," he said, his tone final. "Something you may not understand." Her curiosity flared, stronger than the fear. "I can handle danger," she said, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. Corvin studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He saw her determination, her fire, and he felt a pull he had not felt in many years. But he also knew that danger followed him like a shadow. Leora was stepping into a world she could not yet see, a world that demanded more than courage. It demanded trust, intelligence, and sometimes sacrifice. A distant sound echoed through the mansion, a soft, metallic clang. Leora tensed. Corvin's eyes flicked to the source, his expression darkening. There were forces here, forces beyond human comprehension, forces bound to the house, bound to him. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, more firmly this time. "But now that you are, I will protect you. For now. Leora's heart raced. The thrill of danger mixed with an unexpected warmth. Someone powerful, someone dangerous, was willing to protect her. She didn't know whether to feel safe or terrified. Perhaps both. Corvin turned back toward the shadows, moving deeper into the room. Stay close, he said. Do not wander. This world is not kind to strangers. Leora followed him without hesitation. Her heart pounded in her chest, not with fear alone, but with excitement, curiosity, and something she couldn't yet name. She had thought she was flirting with a dangerous stranger, a mysterious biker. She had no idea she had entered the world of a man who ruled empires from the shadows, a man bound by secrets, curses, and power she could barely imagine. And as the candlelight flickered across the room, casting long, shifting shadows on the walls, Leora realized she had stepped into a story far bigger than herself. A story where danger, desire, and destiny intertwined. And where one wrong step or one brave choice could change everything. Her eyes met Corvin's, and she whispered softly, almost to herself, "I've never felt more alive." Corvin's gaze held hers, unreadable but intense, and in that moment he knew. This woman, bold, daring, and unafraid, would either be his greatest ally or his deepest challenge. Perhaps both. Outside, the rain continued to fall, turning the city into a shimmering world of danger and secrets. And inside the mansion, in the shadows of power and mystery, a story had begun. A story of desire, courage, and the dangerous dance of hearts that dared to touch the edge of darkness. And then, without warning, a figure moved in the shadows, silent, watching, and waiting. Leora did not see it. Corvin did. A chill ran down his spine. The night had just begun, and the true danger was yet to reveal itself. The mansion was silent, except for the soft flicker of candlelight and the distant sound of rain drumming against the tall windows. Shadows moved in corners, stretching across the ornate walls, and each step echoed with a quiet warning. Leora followed Corvin through a hallway lined with paintings of people long gone, their eyes seeming to follow her as she walked. She had never felt a mix of curiosity and fear like this before. Corvin led her to a room at the heart of the mansion. The walls were lined with books, some ancient, others written in languages she did not recognize. The air smelled of old parchment, candle wax, and something faintly metallic. The atmosphere was heavy with power, and it pressed down on her like a living thing. "This is where I study," Corvin said quietly. His eyes scanned the room, as if assessing her reaction. "Knowledge is power, and in my world, power is everything." Leora glanced around, her fingers brushing over the spines of the books. She felt the weight of history, of secrets that were not meant for ordinary people. "It's impressive," she said softly, "and a little frightening." Corvin's lips curved, almost imperceptibly. "Good. You should always be a little frightened. It keeps you alive." Her gaze lifted to meet his, and for a moment, the world outside the mansion disappeared. She saw him not just as the man who had warned her, but as someone complex, someone with shadows in his past and secrets in his soul. There was a distance in him, a wall that no one had crossed, and yet she felt drawn to it. "You live in a world of shadows," Leora said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "And yet, you let me walk into it." Corvin studied her silently, his expression unreadable. Finally he spoke, his voice low and steady. "I did not choose for you to come. You chose it yourself. That is the difference." Leora smiled, though there was a hint of worry in her eyes. "Then I guess I am responsible for whatever happens next." "You are," he said, "but responsibility and danger are not the same. You need to understand the difference quickly." He led her further into the mansion, through corridors that twisted and turned like a labyrinth, Leora felt as though she had stepped into another world entirely, a world where rules were different, where power was a living, breathing thing, and where every choice could have consequences she could not yet imagine. They entered a chamber larger than any she had seen before, filled with artifacts and objects that seemed older than the city itself. Candles burned in ornate holders, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls. In the center of the room was a table, and on it lay a small, dark object that seemed to pulse with energy. "What is that?" Leora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Corvin's expression darkened. "That is part of a family curse," he said, "a curse that has haunted my bloodline for generations. It is dangerous and it is powerful. And now, because you are here, it has noticed you." Leora's heart skipped a beat. "A curse?" "Yes," he said. "It feeds on fear and desire, on choices made without thought. It can destroy or it can teach, depending on how it is approached." She took a step closer, her curiosity overpowering her fear. "And you live with it?" Corvin nodded. "I have no choice. It is bound to my family, to my blood, to me. But it has rules, and if you do not follow them, it will punish you." Leora swallowed hard. The danger that had seemed exciting before now felt heavier, more real. And yet, she did not step back. Instead, she felt a strange pull, as if the curse itself was calling her forward, daring her to face it. "You are brave," Corvin said, his eyes meeting hers. "Or foolish. Perhaps both. Many who face this curse do not survive it. Those who do are changed forever." Leora's pulse quickened. "I want to know," she said. "I want to understand it, and you. I don't want to be ordinary anymore." Corvin studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Very well. But know this. Once you step fully into my world, there is no turning back." He gestured toward the object on the table. It was small, black, and seemed to move as though it had a life of its own. Leora hesitated, then reached out her hand. The moment her fingers brushed it, a chill ran through her body. She gasped, feeling a shiver that was both frightening and exhilarating. The room seemed to pulse with energy. Shadows stretched across the walls, forming shapes that seemed almost human. Leora's eyes widened as she realized the power in the room was alive and aware of her presence. "You feel it," Corvin said softly. "The curse senses new energy, new choices. It knows you are here. It is curious." Leora took a deep breath. "And it wants something?" "Yes," he said. "It wants you to prove yourself, to show courage, to make choices it cannot predict. Only then will it respect you." Her heart raced. She had never faced anything like this, yet she felt a thrill in the challenge. She wanted to see if she could rise to it, if she could match the danger that had brought her here. Corvin watched her carefully, his expression softening slightly. He saw the fire in her eyes, the way she refused to be afraid, even when the room itself seemed to whisper warnings. It was rare to find someone who could walk so close to danger and still smile. "You are unlike anyone I have met," he said quietly. "And that is dangerous for both of us." Leora smiled, a mixture of defiance and excitement in her gaze. "Then I suppose we are even," she said. For a time they stood in silence, feeling the energy in the room, feeling the pull between them. The danger was real, but so was the connection. It was a delicate balance, one that could tip into disaster or into something far more powerful. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from another room in the mansion. Both of them turned sharply, their instincts alert. Corvin's hand went to the small dagger at his belt, and Leora felt a rush of fear mixed with adrenaline. "Stay here," Corvin said, his voice low and commanding. "Do not move." Leora nodded, her heart pounding. She watched as he moved toward the sound, his steps silent and precise. Shadows clung to him like a second skin, and she realized that he was not just a man of power, he was a master of it. The sound had come from a side chamber, and as Corvin approached, the air seemed to thrum with energy. Leora could feel it even from where she stood, an unseen force, alive and aware. She held her breath, unsure whether to follow or stay hidden. Then she heard a voice, faint but clear, speaking in a language she did not understand. The voice was soft, almost melodic, but there was a coldness beneath it that made her shiver. Corvin's hand tightened on the dagger. "It's here," he said quietly. "The curse is active, and it is testing us." Leora stepped forward, drawn by curiosity and courage. "What does it want?" she asked. Corvin shook his head. "It wants to see your strength, your courage, and your heart. But it is not easy. It does not forgive weakness." The shadows in the room shifted, forming shapes that were almost human, almost alive. Leora felt a chill run through her body, but she did not step back. Instead, she lifted her chin, meeting the darkness with determination. Corvin watched her closely. A mixture of admiration and concern in his eyes. He could sense her bravery, her willingness to face the unknown, and it stirred something long buried in him. For the first time in years, he felt hope, not for himself, but for someone else. The shadow moved closer, and Leora felt its cold presence brush against her skin. She took a step forward, her hand trembling slightly, but her gaze never wavered. "Do not fear it," Corvin said softly, standing beside her. "You are stronger than it thinks." Together, they faced the shadow, two figures bound by courage, curiosity, and a growing connection that neither fully understood. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Suddenly, the shadow lunged forward, and Corvin moved with lightning speed, placing himself between Leora and the dark force. He struck with precision, his movements fluid and deadly, yet controlled. Leora watched, awe and fear mingling in her chest, as he faced the danger with a calm she could not comprehend. When the shadow finally receded, leaving the room in uneasy silence, Leora let out a shaky breath. "That was incredible," she whispered. Corvin turned to her, his expression unreadable. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The curse will not stop, and neither will the dangers that come with it. You must be ready." Leora nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear, excitement, and admiration. She had faced the unknown, and she had not run. She had seen Corvin in his element, dangerous and powerful, and it had only drawn her closer to him. For a moment, they stood in the candlelight, the rain still falling outside. The mansion alive with shadows and secrets. Leora realized that she was no longer a stranger in this world. She was a participant. She had chosen to step into the darkness, and now she would face whatever came next, with Corvin by her side. And then, without warning, a soft whisper echoed through the room, faint, almost indistinct, yet unmistakable. It was a warning, a promise, and a challenge all at once. "You have entered a world you cannot yet see, and it will change you forever." Leora shivered, but this time it was not fear alone. It was anticipation. She was ready to face the darkness, to face the curse, and to face the man who had become the center of her world. The night was far from over, and the true test had only just begun. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and glimmering under the first light of dawn. But inside Corvin's mansion, darkness still lingered, heavy and alive. Shadows stretched along the walls like long fingers, and the scent of old wood, candle wax, and iron still hung in the air. Leora moved carefully, her senses alert, every instinct sharpened by the night's trials. She had faced the curse. She had seen its power and its fury, and she had survived. But the danger was not over. Corvin stood near the grand window, his silhouette framed by the rising sun. He looked different in daylight. less like the dark enigma she had first met, yet still commanding and dangerous. "You stayed," he said quietly, turning his gaze toward her. His voice carried a mixture of relief and quiet awe. "Most people would have fled." "I didn't," Leora said, her voice soft but steady. "I told you I'm not ordinary. And I wanted to see it. All of it." Corvin studied her. Her bravery had impressed him, yes, but more than that, her heart had shown a strength he had not expected. Many had entered his world seeking adventure, power, or even greed. But Leora had entered for understanding, for connection. She had faced darkness with courage. "You are dangerous," he said, moving closer. "Not because of what you can do, but because of what you make me feel." Leora's heart skipped a beat. The distance between them seemed smaller now, though the shadows of their worlds still lingered. "And what do I make you feel?" she asked softly. Corvin's gaze darkened, intense and raw. "Hope," he admitted quietly. "I had forgotten hope existed. You remind me that the world can be more than shadows and fear." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Two hearts, both scarred in different ways, met across the space, drawn together by courage, by choice, and by a bond neither had expected. Then, without warning, the mansion trembled. Dust fell from the high ceilings, and shadows shifted unnaturally along the walls. The curse, it seemed, had not been defeated, only delayed. A force moved through the halls, alive and angry, sensing the connection between them. Corvin's hand went to the dagger at his belt. Leora's pulse quickened, but this time fear did not dominate. She had faced the curse before. She could face it again, and she would not stand aside. "Stay close," Corvin said, his voice low but steady. "This will not be easy." Together they moved toward the source of the disturbance. The shadows coalesced in the grand hall, twisting and writhing as if alive. The air grew colder, heavier. Leora could feel it pressing against her chest, but she did not back down. "You must trust me," Corvin said quietly. "Trust that I will protect you, but also that you can protect yourself." Leora nodded. "I do," she said, her voice firm. "We face it together." Corvin allowed a brief smile, rare and fleeting. The two of them stood side by side, facing the shadows that had haunted his life for so long. The curse was relentless, testing them, but it underestimated the bond forming between them, the courage, trust, and strength they drew from each other. The shadows surged forward, and Corvin moved with precision, his dagger flashing, cutting through the darkness. Leora's hands moved instinctively, touching the objects in the room, the ancient artifacts, the candles, the runes etched into the walls. She felt a strange energy respond to her touch, pushing back against the darkness. Together, they became a single force. Corvin's skill and strength, combined with Leora's courage and intuition, created a barrier the curse could not break. Slowly, the shadows recoiled, writhing and screaming in silence, as if recognizing their defeat, at least for now. When the last shadow dissolved into the air, leaving the room in uneasy silence, both of them stood still, breathing heavily, their eyes meeting. There was no laughter, no words of triumph, only the shared understanding of what they had survived together. Corvin finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "You are extraordinary," he said, "brave, unafraid, and alive in a way few are. You've earned more than survival. You've earned respect. Mine." Leora felt warmth spread through her chest. "And you?" she asked softly. "What have I earned from you?" Corvin's gaze softened, though the intensity remained. "Something I had forgotten I could give. Trust. And perhaps something more." The moment stretched between them, heavy with emotion. Desire, connection, and mutual respect intertwined. They had faced darkness and survived. They had learned about courage, about strength, and about each other. And now, standing in the candlelight, they realized something profound. They had changed each other. Outside, the city glimmered under the early sun, oblivious to the battles fought in its shadows. But within the mansion, a story of courage, trust, and unexpected love had begun to take root. Corvin stepped closer to Leora. "There is still much to face," he said quietly. "The curse is not gone. And those who watch from the shadows will not forgive weakness." Leora looked at him, a small smile on her lips. "Then we will face it," she said. "Together." He nodded, a rare expression of relief and pride crossing his face. "Together," he repeated. For a while they simply stood there, side by side, sharing the silence, the tension, and the newfound bond. There was something mythic in the moment, as though fate itself had paused to witness the union of two strong, brave souls. But the world outside the mansion would not remain still. The city held dangers that even they could not yet predict, rival forces that sought to challenge Corvin's power, and remnants of the curse that would test their courage again. Leora's mind raced, but this time she did not feel fear. She felt anticipation. She had stepped into a world that was dangerous, mysterious, and powerful, and she had survived. She had faced darkness, and she had not only survived, it had made her stronger. Corvin's hand brushed hers, subtle yet electrifying. "You have changed me," he said quietly, "in ways I cannot explain." "And you have changed me too," Leora replied. "I see things I never could before. Danger, yes. Fear, yes. But also courage, hope, something more." Their eyes met, and in that gaze was understanding, acceptance, and the beginnings of love. Something neither of them expected, but something they both needed. It was not perfect. It was not easy. But it was real. Suddenly, a distant noise broke the moment, a soft, deliberate tapping echoing through the hallways. Both turned, instincts alert. The mansion was quiet. Yet something waited in the shadows. The curse was not defeated, and there were others who watched, who waited for a misstep. Corvin's hand tightened around the hilt of his dagger. Leora felt the familiar thrill of danger, but now it was mixed with confidence. She would not run. She would not falter. Together, they had faced shadows, and together they would face whatever came next. "Ready?" Corvin asked, his voice steady. Leora nodded, her eyes blazing. "Always." Together they moved toward the heart of the mansion where the shadows lingered, where secrets waited, and where the world of power, danger, and destiny still had lessons to teach. But this time, they would face it as equals, bound by trust, courage, and something neither could deny, an unexpected growing love. The mansion seemed to breathe around them, alive with energy, as if recognizing the union of two souls who dared to face darkness together. The curse might test them again, and rivals might come, but they had discovered a truth stronger than fear. When two hearts stand together, even shadows must yield. And as they disappeared deeper into the mansion, ready to face whatever came next, one truth was clear. This was only the beginning of their story. Love, courage, and destiny had intertwined, and no darkness could undo it. Outside, the city sparkled under the rising sun, and somewhere in the distance, a faint shadow watched, waiting, whispering promises of future challenges. But for now, Corvin and Leora stood together, unbroken, unafraid, and alive.